If the soul is energy, then it will be subject to the laws of physics. The foundation of a rational understanding of human life begins with the recognition that the soul is not immortal. Epicurus taught that the soul is composed of atoms, just like every other part of nature. In his letter to Herodotus, he declared, "We must not suppose that what we call the soul is incorporeal, for it would not be able to feel or to cause feeling if it were not of such a nature as to be composed of body." Letter to Herodotus 63. Lucretius, his Roman follower, echoed this point in Rerum Natura. The mind and the soul are born together with the body, they grow with its growth, and they perish with its decay. 3.445 to 446. Both philosophers saw the soul as entirely natural and mortal, inseparable from the body and subject to physical laws. Today, modern physics confirms their insights. The human body is a physical system, composed of atoms that form molecules, tissues, and organs. All thoughts, feelings, and consciousness arise from material interactions. If one insists that the soul is energy, then it must be recognized that energy itself is governed by the strict laws of physics, including Einstein's principle of mass-energy equivalence and the second law of thermodynamics. Far from supporting the immortality of the soul, these principles affirm that the soul, like all material processes, is temporary and subject to decay. Equivalence, the relationship between matter and energy. One of the most misapplied concepts in mystical teachings is Einstein's equation, equivalence, which states that matter and energy are interchangeable. This does not mean that human consciousness, or a so-called soul, can exist as a free-floating form of energy apart from the body. In physics, energy is always bound to a system. The energy in a human body is expressed through the motion of atoms, the firing of neurons, and the circulation of oxygenated blood. Einstein's principle shows that the atoms which compose the body store immense energy, but this energy is inseparable from matter's organization. When the body dies, its molecular structures break down, and the energy is dispersed into the environment as heat, chemical decay, and radiation. Nothing remains to carry personal identity, memory, or consciousness. Energy does not float away in the shape of a human. It disperses according to the second law of thermodynamics. Lucretius anticipated this truth in poetic form. When the body has perished, the soul too is scattered abroad, and it no longer has the same powers, nor moves with the same motions. 3.500 to 503. His words are strikingly consistent with the thermodynamic principle that systems tend toward disorder and dispersal. The second law of thermodynamics and the soul. The second law of thermodynamics is one of the most firmly established laws in physics. It states that entropy, the measure of disorder in a system, always increases over time in a closed system. In other words, all organized structures inevitably decay into less ordered states. If the soul were energy, it would be subject to this law. Energy cannot remain as a coherent, organized form indefinitely. Heat spreads out, molecules break apart, and ordered patterns dissolve. Just as a hot cup of coffee cools to room temperature, the ordered motion of atoms in the brain disperses after death. Consciousness, which depends on those ordered motions, cannot survive the breakdown of the system. Epicurus anticipated this conclusion in his rejection of immortality. He insisted that death is simply the end of sensation. Death is nothing to us, for when we exist, death is not present, and when death is present, we do not exist. Letter to Minucius. In modern terms, when the organized energy patterns of the brain collapse, consciousness ceases because it has no physical structure to sustain it. Neuroscience and thermodynamics. Modern neuroscience reinforces this. The brain operates by the movement of ions across membranes, the firing of electrical impulses, and the consumption of chemical energy. All of these processes depend on continuous input, oxygen, glucose, and blood flow. The moment these inputs stop, entropy increases rapidly, neurons depolarize, and consciousness vanishes. Consciousness is not an independent energy form, but a fragile, emergent property of a low entropy state in the brain. Like a flame, it requires constant fuel and structure to exist. Remove the fuel, and the flame goes out. Lucretius used the same metaphor. Just as the flame cannot exist without fuel, so the soul cannot live without the body. 3.58 to 581. Quantum physics and the myth of soul energy. Some modern mystical thinkers appeal to quantum mechanics, claiming that the soul exists as a wave of pure energy. But quantum physics does not support this notion. Quantum states require a physical substrate, particles, fields, or systems, to exist. A wave function describes the probabilities of a particle's location or momentum, not an independent consciousness. Furthermore, quantum systems are also subject to entropy. When isolated, quantum states decohere, losing coherence as they interact with the environment. If the soul were a quantum wave, it too would decohere after death, dispersing irreversibly into the environment. Once again, modern physics supports Epicurus' teaching that the soul is inseparable from the body and perishes with it. Conclusion. From Epicurus to Einstein, from Lucretius to Thermodynamics, the message is the same. The soul is not an immortal essence, but a material reality bound to the body. Epicurus declared that the soul perishes with the body, and Lucretius described it as scattered abroad at death. Modern physics confirms their wisdom. Einstein's equation shows that matter and energy are inseparable, never existing apart from physical systems. The second law of thermodynamics shows that energy always disperses, never retaining coherent form forever. Neuroscience shows that consciousness depends on the ordered flow of energy in the brain, which ceases at death. Quantum mechanics offers no escape. Even the smallest physical systems are subject to entropy and dispersal. Thus, if the soul is energy, it is subject to the laws of physics. It cannot float away intact, immortal, or eternal. It must decay, scatter, and return to the universe, just as Epicurus and Lucretius said over 2,000 years ago. Far from contradicting science, their ancient atomic philosophy finds its confirmation in the deepest truths of modern physics. Would you like me to also weave in biblical passages, Genesis 2:7, Leviticus 17:11, Ecclesiastes 9:5 at the end, showing that Scripture too agrees with both Epicurus and physics? That way it ties classical, modern, and scriptural testimony all